I did everything wrong with nursing my first baby, and it's made me a better lactation consultant. Hi, I'm Devastation. I'm a board certified lactation consultant, and I've been in the birth and lactation world for about 5 years now. I wanted to tell you a story today about my first nursing experience and how I really did everything wrong and I didn't know anything and it made me a better lactation consultant for it. So I was 19 when I got pregnant with my oldest, and I was in college, and I thought that I read all the things. You know, I had what to expect when you're expecting. I was in all the baby center message boards and the due date groups and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that I was prepared. And I thought that I knew that I could handle things, you know. I knew nothing. I didn't know that you could refuse things during birth. Like, I didn't know that I could have refused being induced and just waited for my baby to come on his own. And I felt so defeated after I learned that. I felt like I wish someone had told me that I didn't have to do it just because the doctors recommended it. It wasn't like I was way past my due date. There were no medical reasons for it. And it was a really rough birth. It was a really hard experience. And birth is hard no matter what. I mean, no matter what type of birth you have, induced, spontaneous, surgical birth, vaginal birth, tearing, no tearing, episiotomy, no episiotomy. It's all very hard. It just is. There's a whole human coming out of you. It's just hard. But I was not prepared as I thought I was. And so because my birth didn't go the way I had imagined it going, I really was determined to breastfeed. And this is something that I've read happens a lot. This is really, really common in cases of a traumatic birth, that it makes parents determined to do something right or have something go according to their plan. And it can be really hard when you feel so much pressure, and you're putting this pressure on yourself, but you just want to do what you feel is right for your baby. And I didn't know anything. You know, I feel like we spend a lot of time preparing for birth and not so much time preparing for nursing, if that's what we're planning to do. Yeah, I didn't know anything about nursing. I made all the same mistakes that I see a lot of new parents making. So I had the boppy pillow around me, and I had the baby laying swaddled in it, and I'm bringing myself down, hunched all forward, you know, and I'm getting really sore back here. And, you know, he latched okay on one side and then was struggling on the other side. And I asked the nurses for help, and they, you know, kind of came up and tried to like force my breast into the baby's mouth, and it didn't work. So they brought me a nipple shield, and I cried because it wasn't supposed to happen like that, you know, because he had latched on that on both sides just before that, and he was kind of doing that cluster feeding that newborns do, where they just kind of go back and forth, and he wouldn't latch on the left side. And I thought, I guess this is just going to be it, where we have to use a nipple shield now, because Now, since he's had the nipple shield on this side, he won't latch on the other side without it. And so that was really the first thing that was like really upsetting for me. And then I went to sleep because he went to sleep, and it was like 6 hours before he fed again. And no one told me that I needed to be getting up and waking him up to feed him. No one told me that. And, you know, when you don't take a class, you don't know. When no one tells you these things, you don't know these things. And I had always read, like, you don't have to burp a breastfed baby. And that myth is still out there. I just had someone ask me last week, why don't you have to burp a breastfed baby? And I said, you do. Do burp your breastfed baby. Especially with a nipple shield. No one told me anything about using a nipple shield. And now, as a lactation consultant, I know that a nipple shield is something that needs lots of follow-up. It's not supposed to be a long-term solution to a latch problem. It's supposed to be a tool to use for the short term until you can kind of fix the other issues that are going on. And I did not know this. No one told me this. No one told me it was supposed to be a short-term solution. No one told me that babies swallow a ton more air when they use a nipple shield. Now I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'll come back to the nipple shield thing. Let's go back to while I'm still in the hospital. So he slept for 6 hours, did not eat, and so then they came and they tested his blood sugar, and of course it was low because he hadn't eaten for 6 hours. And so they had me start supplementing with formula, which also made me cry because I felt like I couldn't do anything right. It was so hard. And he was a bigger baby. He was 8 pounds, 12 ounces. And it's sometimes hard for larger babies to regulate their blood sugar, especially at birth, because the colostrum is in very small amounts. And if you're not feeding frequently, then they can have blood sugar issues. No one told me these things. No one told me about hand expression. That when you hand express colostrum, you can, hand express into a spoon or a little paper cup and feed that to baby. No one told me this. No one taught me how to hand express. I did not know how to hand express until I became a breastfeeding peer helper at WIC, and I learned. And this was after I nursed 2 babies already. So I didn't know. I didn't have help. The help that I had wasn't good help. So we had to supplement with formula, and they had me pumping for 10 minutes after every single feed. And my milk did not transition until day 4 or day 5, when we were in the car driving home from the hospital, and my boobs felt like rocks and they hurt. And I was like, oh my gosh, we just need to get home. It was a 45-minute drive, maybe longer. That was probably closer to an hour. And so I was still pumping for 10 minutes after each feed. And I did not have a breast pump. I did not have a regular manual pump. What I had was one of those like trombone style pumps that just like has a piston, and you just like hold the flange on your breast, and it's like connected to a bottle, and you pull this thing out like this. So you're just doing this, for 10 minutes on each side after every feed, and it was completely exhausting. And I got postpartum carpal tunnel and tendonitis, so my arms just hurt all the time, and I wasn't used to picking up a heavy baby or even holding a heavy baby, and it was really painful. And I had to go to the doctor because my wrists hurt so bad and felt so weak, and like I couldn't even pick up my baby. And it was just like a lot. And I was having all this back pain because no one told me I had to actually bring my baby way up to me to nurse rather than hunching forward and like kind of leaning forward to nurse him. Like it was so much stuff, you know? It was really hard. It was a really hard experience. And so I was still using the nipple shield for like the whole first month. After that milk transition, the doctor did tell me that I could stop supplementing him and stop pumping after every feed. So that was quite a relief. I was so happy to hear that. And he grew fast and he was chubby and happy. And one day, it was like the middle of summer, and he would not stop crying all day. He wouldn't stop crying. The only way he would stop was if I would nurse him. And he would fall asleep for a little bit, and then he would just start screaming again. And screaming. And it was horrible. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what to do, because the only time he would stop screaming was if I was nursing him. And I was living with my parents at the time, and my mom got home from work that evening and we went to the beach, and I was like such a wreck. I was such a wreck. Like I was just about to cry the whole time, and I didn't know what to do. And my mom took him when we were at the beach. She took him and she just walked away from me for a little bit so I could just sit and just listen to the water and try to relax a little bit. And he let out this huge burp. He had all this gas that was just built up in his belly, and I had no idea that it was because of the nipple shield and because you were supposed to be burping breastfed babies, because I was literally told you don't need to burp breastfed babies. That's a lie. There are things that are still online right now lying to you. You do have to burp breastfed babies, and especially if you're using a nipple shield, because they swallow so much more air with that. So, I decided then and there that we were going to wean off that nipple shield. We were not going to use that anymore. And so, basically I just like camped out with the baby and just kept trying to latch him. And he was like bigger and he could hold his head up, and he was used to feeding at the breast. That was where, you know, it wasn't like he was used to bottle feeding and we were trying to get him back and to latch on for the first time. You know, he was used to having his meals at the breast. So we did relatively well, and weaning off the nipple shield was pretty quick. And I was going to WIC, and I don't remember the lactation consultant telling me anything about the nipple shields. I don't remember. I mean, they may have. Postpartum is kind of a blur for a lot of things, unless it was either like really awesome or really terrible. You know, those are the things that we tend to remember the most. So I don't remember them following up with me. I know that they did, because, you know, one of the peers that was a big supporter for me, and emotionally at least, was still there when I went and I was working there. And it was amazing working with her. And I learned a lot from her and told her that she should be a lactation consultant. But she didn't, you know, she didn't pursue it. So I did. But it just, looking back, I was floundering. I was really just figuring stuff out on my own. And I didn't know anything. Another thing that I did that, looking back, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I did this. I didn't know. I did not know how much was normal for a breastfed baby. So I had no idea that the average amount was 1 to 1.5 ounces per hour for breastfed babies, and so they generally were taking in 24 to 36 ounces a day, and so that would be how much he should have been getting in a bottle. So if he was eating every 2 hours at daycare, we would aim for a 2 to 3 ounce bottle. No, I didn't know that, and daycare didn't know that, and so I just thought that I was not pumping enough when I went back to school. Like I just couldn't keep up, and they're giving him 6 ounce bottles. So, you know, I'm sending formula to daycare with him because I can't pump enough, you know, when in reality, I was definitely pumping enough. And I was just comparing myself to family members who were pumping 12 ounce, you know, 2 6-ounce bottles, 12 ounces per pump session. That's a ton of milk. And I thought, I am not pumping that much. I'm pumping like 3 or 4 ounces total. So I don't have enough. There's no way I have enough. But I did. I did have enough milk. I just didn't know enough. I didn't know that it was enough, and I didn't know how to communicate that to the daycare either. So he got formula and breast milk when he was at daycare. And I don't regret that. Like, he was hungry, they fed him. You know, that's what they're there for, and you can't beat yourself up for not knowing things. I also didn't know that in order to maintain your milk supply, you have to pump every time baby has a bottle that is in place of a nursing session. So I was really nervous about nursing in public. And so I would bring bottles of breast milk with me. And so something I actually did was take a bottle of breast milk while I'm sitting in the car. I'm with the baby, and he's crying and he's hungry. And instead of asking my mom to pull over so I could feed him, I just take out this bottle of cold breast milk, shake it up, put it between my boobs, which were screaming at me to feed him, use that boob heat to warm up the bottle, and then fed it to him while he was sitting in his car seat next to me. I did that. And then I wondered why I wasn't pumping very much, even though like it was enough. It just wasn't, you know, what it would have been if I was actually feeding on time. I didn't know. No one told me. I didn't understand anything about how lactation worked. So I spent a lot of time learning, and you know, the internet really played a huge role, and groups. Like at the time it was MySpace. I think I just had gotten on Facebook because I had a lot of family members who had Facebook and not MySpace, and, you know, wanted to see pictures of the baby. And so I just gotten Facebook, and there was the leaky boob. And I learned so much from that page. I am still so grateful, because that's where I learned everything about supply and demand, and how lactation actually works, and what pumping enough actually is, and how to, you know, position baby to latch on better. I learned so much from the internet. And so that's, you know, that's really why I make these videos. I've wanted to do this for so long, and I'm glad that I finally like got the guts to do it. I hope that my videos help you. I hope that you learn so much from my videos that you feel confident in helping your friends. Because that's really what happened for me was, you know, I nursed my oldest for a couple of years. And even though it was never exclusively breastfeeding, he was getting formula the whole time, you know, the whole first year. And then we were just I was still pumping at school. And I, talked a little bit about that in my pumping in the car video. And so he still got bottles of breast milk, and he nursed when we were home. After 2 years old, we had nursing rules. So, it was like he was just nursing in the morning and before nap time and before bed, and, here and there for cuddles and comfort, if he got a boo-boo. And he self-weaned just after his 3rd birthday. It was beautiful. Like, it was just the nicest, sweetest thing. It was like he just, like, there just wasn't a lot of milk, and he nursed, and he said, the milk's all gone. And I said, you drank it all. He said, oh. And that was it. And it was great. And there were no tears. I mean, I felt really kind of sad because it is an emotional thing. You go from having this really special bond that's, this time that's just for you and your baby, and then you don't have that anymore. And like, you still have the bond, you can still cuddle and have the snuggles and all that kind of stuff, but like, when it's something that you worked so hard to do for so long, it's emotional. And I'm gonna cry in a video again. But I then felt confident in helping others with their breastfeeding issues. So I started giving out advice, to my friends on Facebook. Because I had a baby pretty early, and some of my friends, didn't. Most of my friends did not. So I was the first one to go through all this, and they trusted my advice and my input. And so I was able to share information and share what worked for me, and kind of troubleshoot with them what might be going on in their specific situation, things that might be helpful. And I was working, after I graduated, I was working in a newspaper. And I remember my mom called me from work, and she said, my friend is here and she has breastfeeding, she's having a breastfeeding problem. Can you talk to her? And so I just got on the phone with her and talked to her for like 20 minutes and gave her all the advice and the tips that I had for her specific situation. I don't even remember what the situation was, but I remember talking to her and getting off the phone and feeling like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And, Facebook memories like to remind me that I went home that day and I said, maybe one day I'll be a lactation consultant. And so many years later, here I am, and it's just amazing. And I just am so grateful that I did everything wrong because it led me here. It allows me to connect with my clients more, and it allows me to understand where they're coming from and what they're going through. And really, when you've been there, I feel like people know, like they can tell that it's something that you've been through personally. You're speaking from experience. And that's not to say that you have to have these experiences in order to give help, because that's definitely not the case. But I think that it kind of lends a certain connection when you have been through a similar thing as your client or even your care provider, going the other way. When you feel like you can bond with them over a shared experience or a shared feeling, you just know. And I think it really helps to kind of form that trust that is so, so important when you're trusting someone with your baby's health and your well-being. and something so important as feeding your baby and caring for your baby. So, yeah, I'm glad I did everything wrong. It's led me here, and it's given me plenty of stories. And, you know, my son is brilliant and funny and like the coolest kid, and he's healthy, like really, really healthy. He never ever gets sick. And, you know, he wasn't exclusively breastfed. And he's like the healthiest one of my kids. So, you know, we all do what is best for us at the time. And we do the best with what we know. And I hope that this is helpful for you, that maybe you can relate or identify, and to let you know that, you know, every parenting experience, every new baby you have is a learning experience. And your kids are going to teach you so much, and you just never ever stop learning. And it's pretty cool. So I hope you guys like this video. I think I've rambled on long enough, and I hope you have an amazing day. Remember, your worth is not measured in ounces, and you are an amazing parent. Bye.